First, I'd just like to thank Kat for inviting me to speak. It's really exciting to be able to talk about my work, which is about you. Let me just quickly tell you a little bit about myself so you get a background about what brought me here. Some years ago, I worked in the industry, and I was an artist rep, as Kat said, and all of my clients were men. And so when I came into the academy, I thought, why couldn't I explore why that was? Why were all my clients men? So early on, I began by digging into early Nike women's advertising to kind of see the backstory about how that was built. And then, one night in Toronto in 2005, Neil French revealed himself, and I was inspired, and I haven't looked back since. So that's really what threw me into looking at why there are so few of you. So today, for the sake of time, I'm going to take a deep dive into the results I got out of Spain and Sweden, so that's going to be my main comparison. There we are. And then I'm also going to talk just briefly about what I'm beginning to find in Italy and Peru, as well as Canada. I've also interviewed women in the US, but you guys are here, so I'm not going to tell you about yourselves. Finally, as I did this work, I promised anonymity to everybody that I spoke to, and so today you're only going to see quotes. I'm going to be the medium telling you what they said, but you're never going to know who they are. So I'm honoring that. And then finally, I just want to really honor and acknowledge all the people who have really helped me. There have been so many women and men across the world who have reached out and said, yes, I'll talk to you, and I'm really grateful for them. So I want to be clear, and I think a lot of us are on the same page with this. This is really not about bashing men at all. Rather, it's about finding solutions to the problems that face creative women across the world and searching for ways that raise creative women up while uniting all creatives to do great work. Okay, so I'm going to begin with some statistics, but they tell just a teeny bit of the story. The words are, frankly, much more interesting. So as you can see, in Spain, there's about 15% creative women. And as you head south, the numbers begin to tell the story that our sisters in the southern countries have a much rougher go of it than those of us who live in the north. So Italy has about 12% women, and Peru has a, to me, shocking 6%. As you move northward, Canada has about 21, and Sweden about 22. So as we move forward, I'm going to let their words share the story. So I'm going to begin with Spain. We'll turn southward. Spain, there are 75% of the students are females in Spain that study advertising, yet only 15% of the women who work in advertising. So where do they go? Beyond this giant disconnect, a lot of things jumped out as I interviewed not just CDs, but I had to also interview copywriters and art directors because I couldn't find enough CDs to interview. So there were 3 themes that come out, and I'll walk you through each one with some quotes to bring them to life. So the first theme is, okay, the big ideas belong to men, and the pink ghetto is alive and well. So here are their words. It's far from democratic. Everything we had done was worthless. They gave the very cool accounts to the boys' teams. The idea should be that there is no discrimination in creative departments, and in fact, as a creative person, I should have no gender, but it's not like that. I was the only woman who presented, Ideas presented by a guy, everyone would laugh. An idea presented by a woman, they did not laugh. It was a very tense environment. Okay, the executive creative director can always say, this idea is not going to be presented or needs to change at the last minute, so I present many things that nobody sees. Your credibility costs more because you are female. It's very clear now to me that I cannot compete. And to me, an incredible statement. Something you hear very often is silence, because all the power is highly concentrated. Okay. Third, our second finding is that Spanish women often feel pressure because they're not part of what they call the Teterio o Club de Chicos, and they feel pressure to remain silent about the inequities. And here's their voices to bring this to life. You have to swallow many things. There are so many little sexist jokes, bromitas. There's patronage here. I will never be able to present a contest with the agency because the team has its star. They gave this very cool account to the boys' team, and the principals were pissed off because they said, when we said, why do they own it and we do not? Equity is a lie. And finally, the world is male, and with that, I've told you everything. And the third finding, children and family create a much bigger burden on creative women than their male counterparts. Probably isn't a surprise. And it often drives their decision to leave. I think this might be more culturally driven in southern countries than here, but it is something that I found in every country where I interviewed women. And now their words. Priorities of women, mothers change. Everyone knows this. She will care less about her work. So they tended to really internalize their issue, the problem. Or she'll turn it on to herself. I think it's your feminine attitude. If you want to be creative and want to be a mother, it's inconsistent. At a certain age, you have to leave to become a mother, and that's it. And as I spoke with them, fear often would loom large, even with anonymity. Please don't tell anyone I'm complaining. And of course, as with every country I visited, Spanish women are paid less. The atmosphere seemed very good, but they raised our salary the same day. I had exactly the same position, and I earned 100 euros less. Okay, now I'm going to zoom through 3 countries for the sake of time, giving you a key quote and 3 or 4 findings. So, first is Italy, with I think my favorite quote of all. First of all, there's about 12% women in creative and really few CDs. We're actually having trouble finding them. But from one of them, this wonderful quote, which I think really frames their experience. He, the CEO, makes you feel as if you are kissed by God just because you have a job in an advertising agency. Okay. And without quotes, again, to be short, there are 4 themes that bubble up in Italy. First, there's a desperate need for stability, and by that they're talking about the work-life balance, which is totally neglected by agencies. 2, femininity is a barrier to entry, and it needs to be relinquished when you enter creative. 4, women are perceived as more likely to change jobs and take up challenges. And 4, neurotic work and long days deter women from applying and staying, especially when families come into the mix. Okay, it gets worse. Peru. Okay, 6% of women in creative and very, very few female creative directors. And the quote that stood out, while it's not an absolute truth by any means, but it really speaks to women's boots on the ground experiences in Peru. I know that I will never be a creative director because I am a woman. And here are the 4 preliminary findings that seem to be coming out of Peru. First, ideas always sound better coming from men. Creative women often claim to possess male profiles, which I think is really interesting, and I hope to find more information on this one. Third, creative women have emotional intelligence, and they do not believe that men possess the same. And fourth, the struggle to balance private and professional lives weighs particularly heavily on women. And then heading north, we'll stop in Canada before I head over to Sweden. In Canada, women make up 21% of creative departments. And there, quote, there are more female than males graduating in advertising programs, unquote. And a wonderful quote that sort of frames everything and speaks to their pride. Women have a ton to bring to the party, and we'd all benefit from more female leadership. And there were 3 key findings that came out of Canada. While these CDs express a pride in Canadian advertising, they also saw a masculine culture that reinforced itself. They also spoke a lot about Canadian social structure supporting families, and that had a positive impact on women and men. But the work-life balance was still an issue for them. And third, they talked a lot about women's need to advocate for themselves. Okay. So my last country on the tour where I will take a deep dive like Spain is Sweden. Here, women make up 22% of creative departments. And like Spain, there are, quote, many, many brilliant girls at school, unquote. But unlike Spain or any other country I explored, there's a larger proportion of female CDs. And I don't have an exact number at this point. I'm playing with different data, but it looks like it's between 7 and 9%. So even better is not great. This fact, along with their seriously juicy candor, inspired me to really go a little deeper in the quotes, so please indulge me as I go a little more expansively into their quotes. So 4 key findings bubble up in Sweden. First, social structures support families, but it goes deeper than that in Sweden because the social ideals along gender lines also change. And by the way, I think this is interesting, Swedish CDs have on an average about 2.1 or 2.2 children, so they have more children than female creative directors in the US and Canada. Okay, and here's their story. Social systems have done a lot for me. Working in Sweden and my office makes it possible. My friends in England feel that they have to leave when they have kids. In Sweden, we are very equal with taking care of children. Men are not as macho. It's 50-50 at home with children. Maybe, because another woman said. The funny thing is, the maternity leave is a trap. You get paid for 1.5 years to stay home with the kids, but it doesn't have to be 50%, so the split doesn't have to be equal. Because the men make more money, usually it's the mothers who stay home. Yes, the men are changing the most. Status now has to do with who has the most time for kids, who has the most time with kids for men and women. Okay. Women suffer because they still bear the burden of more family obligations, and men tend to promote other men, and that always leads to more pay. Girls, mothers, are more efficient when it comes, and they come in early and they work. But the culture of agencies say it's great to work late. So you can see parallels. Okay, second finding, who you are influences who you hire. And my evidence, not just here, but the Swedish women were really much more verbal, but my evidence suggests that the words I heard from the other side, which is women saying, oh, it's all about the book, I think that the evidence here really challenges that. So here we go, here are their stories. Swedish agencies are different. American agencies are very hierarchical. In Sweden, it's flat. Still, a group of boys sticks together very tight. Same outfit, same attitude. Being a girl in that group makes it more difficult. Men play together. They have their own community and don't invite women into these communities. As men are still the majority, the culture values are more male-oriented. They build a culture that's nourishing for them. Then women become the audience, and it's not a culture we share. When I teach at school, the girls who apply are much more clever. You see girls are actually better. But when they go to the agency, the men get hired first and get paid more. If they have a man and a woman at the same level, the men will always recognize themselves in the man's portfolio, and it will be easier to pick them. And finally, men get more opportunities because other men rule the opportunities. I don't think they're aware of it. They just see themselves in the work. The only thing to make it better is more women, more women, more women. The third theme that came out of Sweden, Project assignment is influenced by gender. This bubbled up in other countries too, but the Swedes, again, were just more bold about speaking about it. So here are their voices. The bigger the account, usually there are men at the top. If it comes to lifestyle, oh, that's for female creatives. It's very divided into female and male. You can't afford to make mistakes. Mediocre men can go on anyway, but for women, the eyes are on you. You have to deliver all the time. The environment favors what is male and not female. The agencies break women down, and women want to leave. Women have to leave. Okay, yet, on the other side, I have always been seen as a creative and not a woman. But as a young woman in meetings, I'd say something to a client and they'd pay no attention. But when my male colleagues, 10 years older, would say the same thing, everyone would say, oh, yeah, yeah. But over time, we have proven that we can work on autos and like accounts and not baby food and sanitary products. And that's a good thing because clients really want women. Woohoo, we could all move to Sweden. Okay. However, another woman, speaking of judging, and we had a discussion about that, so I think this is pretty interesting. She was talking about a friend of hers, so this is secondhand. And she said, her friend was asked, how come your country always sends women? And her friend said, it's not true, we send both. The question should be turned around. It's obvious they are not there. They are completely invisible. Okay. And the fourth and final theme that came out of Sweden is that women are their own worst enemies, and we've had a talk about that as well. And here are their voices. I think it is something with older women rejecting younger ones. Women working with other women are afraid for their position. Women are not trained to claim space. And the results of that leads to women have lower salary. It's traditional. We need to break this. Women are not good at discussing salary. Women are comparing themselves to other women. Insecure women will try to undermine other women, but it is not explicit. And then finally, I'm going to quote a quote that Lauren Tucker quoted. One of the CDs quoted former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright when talking about this, and she said, there's a place in hell for women who don't help each other. So, now I'm going to move on to the 6 overarching themes, which represent my findings across all of the countries. And I'm going to quote from a Swedish CD as a segue to get us there because I think it's fabulous. We in advertising are not modern, we just think we are. All right, here are my 6 themes. Okay, first, you're not alone, but you guys already knew that. The train has left the station, and it's loaded with far more girls, and they are not going away. Third, it's time, not titles. I know some people are going to disagree with me. But my findings suggest that the future status is going to be about time and, of course, money. But time is going to matter more than titles. Fourth, take up space. And going back to an earlier presentation, it's not about how you use your legs, but rather it's about being seen and heard on big accounts destined to win big awards, on judging panels that bestow those awards. Fifth, respect and reward. Creative women across the world are tired of working hard to do great work and then working harder to prove themselves again just because they are female, all the while being paid less. And the final finding that I found across all the countries, men hire in their own image. Intentional or unintentional, it is something that the industry can no longer ignore. Okay. Despite all that I've learned, I really believe, and I think this has been talked about today, that the lack of women in creative isn't really a gender issue, and when we frame it like that, we minimize it. I feel that it is a business problem. So I'd like to propose a few solutions framed by 4 business imperatives. First one, clients and consumers. It's a global fact that women make most of the consumption choices, while they make up only a fraction of creative departments. If clients aren't demanding more female creatives, I believe they will be doing so soon, or I can hope so. So, some solutions to consider. First, creative women need to be braver. Demand what you are worth, and then demand it again, because the guys are already doing that. Agencies that heed your call will make a wise investment. We know that it takes about 30% of an average salary to hire and retain a new employee. So I would suggest that agencies protect their investment in women by closing down pink ghettos everywhere where too many great creative women languish until they give up and walk out the door. Second, efficiencies and profits. Women across the globe have demonstrated over and over that they work with great efficiency. Why? Because you guys tend toward collaboration, and yes, it's often because you've had to learn to be highly efficient because you're the main caretakers of your families. While it's true that travel is never going to go away and that the all-nighters are sometimes necessary, all-nighters driven by ineffective time management and after-hour social bonding needs to be exposed and ended. So, some solutions. Agencies need to recommit themselves or commit themselves to reshaping creative departments for greater efficiency along the baselines of collaboration and flexibility. Greater efficiencies will lead to more ideas, which will equal more solutions. So I would suggest that the agencies tap into the women who already work there and then promote them and pay them for their contribution. Third, human resources. It's pretty apparent to me that the next generation of employees, and many of those already in the junior ranks, will be demanding equity. As children arrive and parents age, that's going to mean sharing family responsibilities, and these women and men will be demanding a shared work-life balance. You may not have heard men voicing that, in part because of some of the things we talked about, that they don't feel comfortable doing so. But I can assure you that a lot of them are thinking of it. I've been talking to men too, and they have told me so. So here's the bottom line. Executive creative directors need to begin to champion women. We've heard that too. Make a conscious effort to not hire and promote people like themselves. And it would be really great, it's a dream, to say goodbye to the territorio o club de chicos and hello reality. And the last, corporate social responsibility. Agencies have an obligation to society. Raising creative women up is, of course, the right thing to do, but it's also really smart and good business. And I also believe that the more creative women there are, we could actually see a qualitative shift in advertising imagery. Advertising as seen through female eyes, kind of going back to the male gaze that we heard earlier today, flipping that, it might lead to healthier messages for girls and boys, men and women, and that is good business and smart business. So, the next time there's a call for a judge on an award panel, make sure that a woman fills that slot. If you're a guy, a few guys here, turn it down and recommend a woman. But please don't always recommend the same women. Or even better, what if we left this conference with a call for all awards panels to be gender balanced by 2015? And perhaps we could even lean on our sponsor, the 4As. Maybe they'd like to tape up that challenge and really embrace it. Okay? And last, I think it's time that women, all of you, stop protecting your own turf, because the more space that you hold on to, the less space there is for all women. So let's make the 3% Club the seedbed for systematically mentoring creative young women. Clients value you, we hope. Consumers want you, we know, and society needs you. Those who embrace these changes will be the leaders of tomorrow's advertising world. It's the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do. And that's my story. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? Sure. Part of it was the logistics that came to me relatively easily, although in the future I'm going to have to push beyond that. Initially, I had a colleague who I could work with in Spain, so that started the Spanish connection. Sweden came to me because of an opportunity when I presented a paper in Sweden, in Stockholm. The folks there were extraordinarily generous to me and reached out and gave me connections. The other two countries I picked, I thought that I wanted to do an interesting, I thought that Spain and Italy would be an interesting comparison at a sort of a micro level because they're both Mediterranean countries. And also I find Italy personally interesting because of their former Prime Minister Berlusconi, who owns all the media channels. And I think it has really dramatically impacted images of women in the media in Italy, and I wanted to see what kind of impact that might have. And I picked Peru again because I have a colleague who I can work with there, but I hope to branch into both Brazil and Argentina. And in Europe, I know that I need to do Germany because I think that'll really flesh things out and give me, I think, a better perspective. And then there's always China and India, and I can just keep going on and on. Any other? Mm-hmm. In terms of dollars? Yeah, they're all paid less than men. Is that what you're asking me? Mm-hmm. In terms of they're actually comparing wages between Italy and wages between Sweden, I haven't done that. Everything has been, not everything, primarily interviews, so I haven't gotten into that yet. Uh-huh.
I've just broken out of school, and I think the number one thing that I've been taught by teachers is that you don't talk about your pay. You don't ask people how much they're paid, and you just know how much you're getting paid. So how do you go about asking for a fair pay, but also knowing that it's at the same level as men that are doing the same job?
Well, I think that men may not share exactly their salary, but they will certainly let each other know when they've gotten a raise. So they kind of keep each other in the loop of how they're going up the scale. I think women just need to be more willing to share honestly and openly. And I think a tip that I tell my female students, which is a little divergent but still relating to when you leave, I say never, ever accept your first offer. If they want you and you come back with a counteroffer, you may get exactly what they offered you to begin with. But they're going to really respect you if you go in and say, no, I really want this. And it could be just in the U.S. another 2 days off or something else that doesn't relate to money. But I think you have to learn to be a very tough negotiator right from the beginning, and you have to be known as somebody who's going to be tough. They're going to be happy to pay you less. So if you're not tough from the get-go, you're not going to get the raise. The person next to you who's demanding it's going to get it. So try to network and just know you're going to always have to be tough. Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments that you want to add? Way in the back.
This is where I'm at, and that.
Very defeatist?
Well, it's just
okay.
Like, this is my position.
Mm-hmm.
Men are. Is there any sense of hope that it's going to change internationally, or from the women interviewed, or do they feel like they've just kind of accepted where they're at?
I think there's actually a lot of hope. In fact, I found the Swedish interviews to be pretty inspiring. As much as it might, I can't give you the whole quote, so I give you a little clip, and perhaps it sounds a little defeatist, but man, these women were they were out there, they were strong, they were powerful, and they were just saying, this is my experience, and I'm not going anywhere, I love what I do, but this is what I've experienced. They were really bold and very strong. And I had the same sense from the women in Canada and the US that I interviewed as well. And there's sort of this north-south divide. It's not the same in Spain, Italy, and Peru. They're much more guarded and not as optimistic. They all love what they do, but they just feel much more burdened by the path that they've chosen as much as they might love it. Mm-hmm. I didn't ask that. That would be actually an interesting question. I didn't ask it, so no.
You said you did a lot of research on the U.S. Did you find anything interesting that we haven't discussed yet?
Honestly, I think I would say, I have to think about it, but I would say no, really. I feel like pretty much what I heard in my interviews came out very loud and clear here. There's nothing that just jumps into my head that's really different. I think the experiences of women in the U.S. were shared very well here today. Anybody else? Okay. Well, if any of you ever want to be interviewed, know anybody who wants to be interviewed, you can just send me an email. So, thank you.